You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, how's it going?
It's going, man. I got a fresh cut for those. It feels a little. There's a little less weight neck up right now, so trim the beard a little bit. Got a trip coming up, and hey, March Madness is here, but we're getting a little close to Packer season, which is very good. But for now, our show is sponsored once again by Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans, as well as Bucks, Brewers, and Summerfest tickets. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. Remember to support local Wisconsin businesses. Also, you can watch every episode of No Huddle Radio on Packers Talk Network with Gil and myself on YouTube. Click on the bell, turn the notifications on. You can join the discussion, chat with us live. Love to see and talk with everybody with the comments coming our way. And there's some modern NFL news right now, Gil, with obviously some rule proposals by certain teams. The Packers, obviously, we talked about where they want the tush-push ban. But we're still in free agency at the start of the league year, and it's March Madness. It's tourney time, so we're going to have a little bit of a spin and a little bit of our own take on the NCAA tournament in Packer version of the tournament. But first things first, we got to talk about the new man added to the wide receiver room in Green Bay.
Yeah, and I have to say, look, is it a major move? No, but is it a helpful move? Yes. The Packers signing wide receiver / return specialist Mecole Hardman to a one-year deal. The Georgia alum, been with the Chiefs, been on 3 Super Bowl winning teams, and he's got the speed. He's got the speed you look for, but I think he's more of a return specialist than he is a receiving weapon. I get the feeling we're going to see him in the Tyler Ervin role, kind of what Tyler Ervin was back in 2019. Jet sweeps, gadget plays. Maybe he gets 5 touches a game, but 3 or 4 of them are schemed specifically for him, and then he'll return punts and maybe kicks.
When this signing happened, my first impression was Keyshawn Nixon is probably going to be a full-time starting corner next year.
Yep.
And Keyshawn Nixon was very public and vocal this offseason about how he's done returning kicks. He doesn't want to do it anymore, even though he's been a 2-time All-Pro at that. But Mecole Hardman's going to take that spot. Jaden Reed, who struggled a little bit on punt returns, maybe it's a way to preserve him and save him for offense. I think this signing makes a lot of sense. It's not going to cost a lot of money. It's reportedly a 1-year deal, and it's just a deal that makes sense given the situation of last year's kick and punt returner, where I think Jaden Reed, they're going to count on him to play a lot of receiver. I think they're going to count on a big year from him coming up, especially because they haven't really addressed wide receiver this offseason. And then Keyshawn Nixon at corner, where the coaches are and GM Brian Gutekunst are very high on Keyshawn Nixon. So you look at that, and Mecole Hardman makes a lot of sense.
He does, and he gives you some of that speed that you lost when Christian Watson's out of the lineup. Now, look, Watson is about 6 inches or so taller. They're not the same type of receiver, but Hardman can stretch the field when he's out there, and you can have him designated to run longer routes, whether it's from the slot or from the perimeter. So there is that. But again, I don't expect him to be a replacement for Christian Watson in any way.
No.
And, as far as Jaden Reed on punt returns, he was serviceable, but not special. And sometimes his judgment was not always the best as far as when to make a fair catch, when to let the ball roll, when to return the ball. So and more importantly, I want him preserved for that larger role with the wide receivers, especially with Watson out for at least half the season. So it makes a lot of sense. It's a low risk kind of a move, and I think it's a good move. Do we sit here and say, oh, yes, the Packers are now Super Bowl contenders because they signed Mecole Hardman? No. Are they better now than they were 2 days ago? Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And hey, he's 27 years old. He just turned 27 a few days ago. He has 3 Super Bowl rings, like you mentioned. He caught the game-winning touchdown catch in overtime of Super Bowl 58. He's got some experience. He's got that pedigree. He's been in those big moments. So we'll see what happens for the Green Bay Packers for this young team. But now it's time to move forward, though, with what we were teasing before talking about the Mecole Hardman signing. It felt like we just had to do some housekeeping there. We had to address that because of the reported signing to the wide receiver room. It's turning time. And this time, this episode, we are going with the greatest moments in our Packers history. And when I say our Packer history, I mean Gil and myself. We haven't been around for the entire lifetime of the Green Bay Packers. Gil, you weren't around for the 1960, the 60s Lombardi years. You were.
No.
We're going all the way back to 1970 in honor of the men's and women's tournaments opening up this weekend. Always a fun time on the calendar. So we just figured, hey, let's talk about the greatest moments in our Packers history. Gil and I were kind of chatting before this episode, prepping ahead of time of what we thought of some moments that have stood out in our lifetimes as Packer fans. I had the obligation and the duty of seeding all this. Gil's going to make the selections to see who moves on. We're going to go through round one, seeds 1 through 16, 8 matchups. We're going to go through round 1 in this episode. In the next episode, we're going to be doing the quarterfinals, the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the championship. And to determine what's been the greatest Packer moment of our lifetime on this bracket. And Gil, let's get started right away with the 16 and the 1 seed. And I will say this real quick, where we tried to stay away from games in general, the greatest moments, not necessarily the greatest games, but this kind of goes against that rule, that logic real quick, because, and I'll explain in a second, number 16 seed, Bart Starr's first head coach win at Dallas versus the number 1 seed, Brett Favre's dad game. And the reason why I put these in there, these are the only 2 that are actual games that we're looking at. The others are going to be moments. Bart Starr getting that big win. It was a game that it was a comeback win in Dallas where a team that Bart Starr obviously dominated against as a player and had some big time moments and historic moments as well. And a lot of moments in that game. It was the first win of the season. It was a bad first year. It was not really the greatest era when Bart Starr was in charge.
No.
Favre's dad game, I could have looked at so many different moments in that game where his dad passed away right before that game, and so many moments where you could have picked out of this game. And it was one of the greatest games he's ever played in his life. He was 22 of 30. He threw 4 touchdowns. His dad was with him that night. That was the way I got it. And I was a big Packer fan at that time, Gil. I was 12 years old when the Favre dad game happened. I got to stay up late because my mom and dad said, yeah, we'll let you stay up and watch the Packer Monday Night Football game. And that's the game that really, I became a diehard. I knew I was a diehard for life. So the 16 seed, Bart Starr's first head coaching win at Dallas against the number 1 seed, Brett Favre's dad game. Who do you got, and what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Okay, this is a mismatch, no question about it. Look, I love that game from 1975. Rich McGeorge, the tight end, caught the winning touchdown pass. The Packers forced a lot of turnovers. It was a special moment for Bart Starr. And the Cowboys went to the Super Bowl that year while the Packers were 4-10. So it was a great moment. But the dad game is, so special. And I mean, even Raider fans were cheering for Bart Starr, for Brett Favre at that game. And more power to them. That was a classy move by the fans in Oakland. So I got to give it to the Favre dad game. And like I said, love both of these moments, but that dad game was unique and just an all-time great moment.
And I think I remember too from the Favre dad game, and I agree with you. I would have picked. That's why the Favre dad game is the number 1 seed, Gil, because that was it's tattooed in my memory for life. Where I have chills just thinking about it because it was a larger than life moment, and he just played the game of his life after one of the hardest things that you could probably deal with in your personal life is losing a parent. And the Raiders had the black hole in Oakland, where that was not a very friendly area of the stands for the visiting team. And you saw all these signs like, we're with you, Brett. Like, we love you, Brett. And it was just, it had everything. And he just played the game of his life, and he played with such a heavy heart. He kept I remember he almost didn't start that game too. And then he decided I'm going to play, and I think that was the best way to honor his father was playing.
It was, and the other thing was his receivers caught everything.
Yes.
I mean,
Javon Walker was
Wesley
incredible.
Walls made a great touchdown catch. I think Javon Walker had a couple, if I recall, and I mean everybody rose to the occasion. Brett Favre rose to the occasion, but everyone also rose to the occasion for Brett Favre.
So the Brett Favre dad game moves on as the number 1 seed, where they will face the winner of the 9th seeded instant replay versus the 8th seeded Monday Night Miracle. For those who need a refresher for the instant replay, that was Don Mikowski finding Sterling Sharp in the end zone against the Chicago Bears in 1989. Gil refreshed my memory earlier today. I really appreciate that, Gil. You're a great partner. And the whole thing was it was a touchdown. It looked like a go-ahead game-winning touchdown for the Packers, but they ruled that Don Mikowski had crossed the line when he threw the football. They went to instant replay. The Bears, I looked at the replay. I looked at the game highlights, and the Bears offense was out there getting ready to take a knee and end the game. And then the refs were like, no, we got to review this. They overturned the call. The Packers get their first win against the Bears in 5 years, ending an 8-game losing streak. And then the Monday Night Miracle, where Antonio Freeman in overtime against the Minnesota Vikings. Somehow the Vikings did not intercept a really bad ball by Brett Favre. It ended up on Antonio Freeman's shoulder and then his back, and then he just picked it up and ran to the end zone. I remember Al Michaels' call being like, what, did they gonna say he caught it? And that was just incredible. I think, and both these moments happen at Lambeau Field in dramatic fashion. This is why it's the 9th seed against the 8th seed. Gil, who's moving on against the Favre dad game?
This is an appropriate 9 versus 8 because it is so close. If you are old enough to remember that game in 1989, how much it meant to the Packers at that point. They were, I think, 5-4 going into that game. They were only 4-12 the previous year. As you mentioned, hadn't beaten the Bears in 5 years. It meant so much to the team that season. Whereas the Monday Night Miracle was a great moment. And boy, that Freeman catch in the rain was just insane. But I don't think the Packers did all that well that year. Where they just kind of, it didn't result in as much. I'm going to go with the instant replay game, but it's so close. To me, that was Don Mikowski's magical moment. And to take it a step further, in their media guide for years after that, the Bears had an asterisk next to that game, and it said instant replay game. So anything that gets under the Bears' skin that long has to advance.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And that was kind of, it felt like the turning of the tide in Green Bay, even though the tide really turned in the 90s, but that instant replay game was just massive. And it was obviously, we have a lot better technology now where I think they would have been able to confirm for sure, that Mikowski didn't fully cross the line. The Monday Night Miracle, like you said, it was a season that was just pretty disappointing, but that was obviously the most fun moment of that season. So, the instant replay, the 9th seed, they are moving on against the number 1 seed Favre's dad game. And now we move on to the next set of matchups. The 12th seed, Walter Stanley, the Turkey Day hero, versus the 5 seed, the Motown Miracle. And Gil, I purposely set this up this way because both these moments happened in Detroit. Yeah. And it's a matter where, and they both happened late in the season, both in November too. And Walter Stanley, obviously, about this. I wasn't around at this time. Game-winning 83-yard punt return for a touchdown late in the game. It capped off a big fourth-quarter comeback where they were trailing by as many as 14, I believe, in that game. And then the Motown Miracle. It was kind of a similar flavor to it where the Packers were trailing essentially that whole game. They were playing a clunker. They were in danger of losing, their 5th game in their last 6. And then Aaron Rodgers throws up a perfect Hail Mary. Richard Rodgers is perfectly set up, and he hauls it in with his big gloves and his big mitts for the shocking walk-off win in Detroit. I remember I was working in TV in Minnesota at that time, and my coworker was a diehard Detroit Lions fan. She's from the Detroit area, and I went ballistic, and she was like, this is the Lions for you. So this is a very intriguing matchup, Gil, because you witnessed both of these moments.
I did.
I only witnessed the Motown Miracle. I remember, I think I was watching the highlights over and over and over again that night and that next week because it was that thrilling. But that Walter Stanley Turkey Day hero, that punt return, you probably have more to chime in on that. So I'm curious to hear what you think.
Well, here's the deal with that. The Packers won that game 44-40. It was a Thanksgiving Day game, and they finished that year 4-12. This was by far the highlight of the season in 1986. The thing is, Forrest Gregg was the head coach, and he told Walter Stanley, do not return, just make a fair catch so we have more time to possibly drive down the field. I think Randy Wright played the game of his life in that game, 3 touchdown passes. And Stanley disobeys his coach and scores the winning touchdown. And Forrest Gregg doesn't know whether to yell at him or thank him, or I think he probably did a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That being said, while that was a wonderful moment, that Motown Miracle was a little more special, I think. Like at the time, because the Packers were so bad in 1986, that Turkey Day game meant so much to Packers fans because they had so little to cheer about. But Aaron Rodgers to Richard Rodgers, and it wasn't even deflected. It was a direct catch by Richard Rodgers, which was fantastic. I'm going to give the Motown Miracle the edge, but 2 really great moments right there.
The five seed Motown Miracle moving on. And I will say this too. Obviously, what some people may forget, where the play before when the game was over, but Detroit just got a little bit of Aaron Rodgers face mask, and a lot of Lions fans like, oh, come on, nobody calls that. And Rodgers got one more shot at it, and he launched up a perfect ball. And I remember Richard Rodgers was just standing in his own bubble in the end zone. I was like, he's there. Like, he's got a shot. And then just vacuumed into those mitts. And I couldn't believe it. It was just like, it was unbelievable. But the 5 seed Motown Miracle moves on, and they will face the winner of the 13th seed. We want the ball, and we're going to score versus number 4 seed Tramon Williams silences the ATL. For a quick refresher, the 2003 NFC wildcard game between the Packers and the Seahawks at Lambeau Field. The game went to overtime. Matt Hasselbeck famously said after the Seahawks won the coin toss, we want the ball and we're going to score. Both teams went 3 and out on their first offensive possession. Seattle got the ball back facing a 3rd and 11. He telegraphed a pass towards the sideline. Al Harris picked it off. Within the first 5-10 yards after he picked it off, he's already pointing to the end zone saying, yep, he called game. That was it. The Lambeau Field went nuts. The Packers moved on to the playoffs. Tramon Williams silencing the ATL. He had 2 interceptions in that first half game in the 2010 divisional round against the number 1 seed Atlanta Falcons. The Packers are the 6th seed, and they were hot. And they were a hot team. He had that huge interception with just over 2 minutes to go in the first half, which resulted in a Packer score to put them up 28-14. Then Atlanta got a little greedy, and they wanted to get some points right before half. Matt Ryan telegraphed a pass towards the sideline. Tramon Williams read it perfectly, intercepted it cleanly, got past the entire Falcons team into the clear. Packers went up 35-14, and that sealed it. Gil, I remember both of these vividly. Tramon silencing the ATL. That was a highlight. Again, I watched over and over. I watched SportsCenter so much that night after the Packers end up winning that game 48-21. And I knew at that moment, it's like, this team's winning the Super Bowl. Like, this team is destined for the Super Bowl. So this is a tough one. We want the ball. We're going to score the 13th seed, or the 4th seed of Tramon silences the ATL. Who moves on?
I am inclined to go with the 13th seed just because it ended the game right there. It was a playoff game that, I mean, okay, Tramon Williams, it was a big moment, but that was also, I think, Aaron Rodgers' best game of his career.
Yes.
And the thing, like, he was on fire. Everything he did worked, and probably worked better than even he expected it to. So to me, the Al Harris interception was a magical moment. It ended the game. I think the Packers probably still beat Atlanta because Rodgers was just in the zone. Even though the Tramon Williams moment, the 2 interceptions were both huge, huge moments. But I think the finality of the Al Harris moment, I'm going to give them the edge.
Playoff games and Packer games in general, I get just so stressed out watching. But
Yes.
when Tremont had that interception for the pick six right as the halftime buzzer hit, that's when I was like, okay, like we're winning this game. Like
Yep.
I had no worries. But like you said, Aaron Rodgers, he played the game of his life. I'll never forget John Abraham, I think, sacked him on a play, and he did the belt, and Aaron Rodgers saw it. And then 2 plays later, Rodgers spun out of what Abraham was trying to get another sack and then hit James Jones for a first down. And I remember also at the end of the game, one of my favorite moments from that game too was the graphic coming up in that game. It showed Tim Massey. It said, Tim Massey, 0 punts tonight. And that was like, that's just how perfect it was. But Tramon Williams was the one that stood out. That was the moment that stood out to me from that game. But yeah, the 13th seed, we want the ball, we're going to score. The upset over the 4th seeded Tramon silencing the ATL. So we want the ball, we're going to score is going to face off against the Motown Miracle in round 2. Let's move on to the next part. Number 11 seed, Brett Favre and Sterling Sharp tame the Lions versus the 6th seed, Rodgers and Cook shock Dallas. Just to add some context, Brett Favre and Sterling Sharp playing a playoff game in Detroit. Of course, Detroit's in this quite a bit because it's just kind of the way their history has been, where the Packers were trailing 24-21. End of the final minute of the game, Favre finds Sterling Sharp down the field, 40 yards for the game-winning touchdown. The Packers end up going on. They go on and win that game. It was their first playoff win in 11 years. And then Rodgers and Cook shocking Dallas, where Aaron Rodgers got sacked, a play before, and the game's tied at 31 against the top-seeded Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. Aaron Rodgers spins out of the pocket. He sets up. He fires down the sideline to Jared Cook. And there's people thinking like, oh, pass is incomplete. Even Joe Buck on the broadcast, like, oh, that's got to be incomplete. And then they're like, oh, wait, no, they're saying he caught it. And then you saw the replay, and Jared Cook somehow kept his feet in bounds. It helped set up the game-winning field goal for Mason Crosby. They moved on to the NFC Championship game the next week, where then they got blitzkrieged by the Atlanta Falcons, who then got embarrassed a couple weeks later after blowing a 28-3 lead. But this isn't a Falcons podcast. So, Gil, I think these are 2 huge playoff moments in our lifetimes. So I'm curious to hear what you think was the better moment between these 2.
Wow. I mean, this is a tough one because here's the thing about that win over the Lions in 1993. That was the first playoff game for Brett Favre.
Yeah.
And Sterling Sharp had 3 touchdowns in that game, and he was dealing with turf toe. And had he been healthy, he might have run out of the end zone before the ball arrived. And it was a truly Favrean moment where he just let it rip, let it go as far as he could. I don't even know if he knew exactly where Sterling Sharp was at that point. And, the gunslinger it worked. Somehow, some way, it worked. And, do the Packers win a Super Bowl in 1996 if they lose that game to the Lions? I don't know. I think winning that first playoff game was monumental for setting the tone for the future of, the mid-90s Green Bay Packers. Getting back, however, to that Dallas game, first of all, Cook getting his feet in was
unbelievable.
I mean, that was, and talk about a guy who, if he wasn't injured, might have had a much bigger impact that year on the Packers, because Cook only played about half the games, if I recall correctly. And that throw by Rodgers was also pinpoint accurate, set up a long field goal for Mason Crosby to win the game. Is that the game he kicked 2 50-plus yard field goals in the last 2 minutes of the game?
Yes, because Dallas tried to ice. They used their last timeout to ice him. He had the perfect one, and then that second one almost went out, and then it somehow stayed in.
Yeah. Oh, wow. This one is tough, I have to say.
This is the tournament, Gil. This is why. This is why we're here.
I know. Boy. I'm going to go with Favre and Sharp only because of what it set up down the road. I think the historical importance of Brett Favre getting a playoff win in his first playoff game and what it did for the confidence of the Mike Holmgren era Packers gives it a slight edge. Had the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2014, I might have gone the other way. But I think the 93 game led to bigger and better things for the organization. I'm going to give the slight edge to the 11 seed.
when 11 beats a 6 in the actual NCAA tournament, I don't really consider that an upset. I don't consider this an upset either, but here we are. The 11 seed Favre and Sharp tame the Lions. They're moving on, and they will face the winner of the 14 seed. Rodgers and Cobb break Chicago's heart versus the 3 seed Raji's pick 6. ACD refresher. Rodgers and Randall Cobb both returned from injuries in 2013. NFC North Division on the line. Winner takes the NFC North. Aaron Rodgers returning from his first collarbone injury. Randall Cobb returning from a broken leg. And it was that 4th down and 8. And they weren't in field goal range, down by 1 point at Chicago. Aaron Rodgers rolls left, thanks big time to help from John Kuhn, setting a perfect block on now Hall of Fame defensive end Julius Peppers and future Packer Julius Peppers.
Right.
Finding Randall Cobb streaking wide open down the field. Cobb hauls it in, rumbles into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown with less than a minute to go. An unbelievable moment. I watched that in my parents' basement with a bunch of friends of mine, and we went ballistic. It was one of those, just those cold, those like, oh man, like that Rodgers is so cold, man. Like he's so good. And then BJ Raji, the pick 6 in the 2010 NFC Championship game. Packers leading 14-7 in the 4th quarter. BJ Raji steps surprisingly in front of a Caleb Haney pass. It's just a short pass, and then he takes it to the end zone. He nearly fumbled before he got to the end zone, but he got into the end zone, put the Packers up 21-7. That proved to be the difference as they end up winning the game 21-14. Gil, I have a feeling where you're going to go here, but these are 2 moments where it was huge in Packers Bears games. I'm curious to know where you go here. I think I have a feeling because of how I seeded it, but I'm curious to hear what you think about this matchup.
I love both of these moments. I really do. These are special moments, and for Rodgers and Cobb to both come back from injury and to beat the Bears and win the division title in the last minute in Chicago. I mean, that was just beautiful. But seeing a 340-pound guy running with an interception to get the Packers into the Super Bowl, I got to go with the BJ Raji thing. And he celebrated a little too soon. He, like you said, he almost fumbled. He didn't fumble because he got hit. He fumbled almost because he started celebrating at the 10-yard line and almost blew it. But what a great moment. It makes BJ Raji an immortal in Packer lore, and the Packers end up going to the Super Bowl. How many times do defensive nose tackles get pick 6s that, win an NFC championship game? I got to go with Raji.
It was awesome. Yeah, he almost Leon Letted it. So
he almost did.
That was a close one, but luckily he just got to pass the play across the plane with the ball. But yeah, so the 3 seed Raji pick 6 will face the 11 seed Favre and Sharp tame the Lions in round 2. To the next matchup, number 10 seed, the first Lambeau Leap versus number 7 Brett Favre arrives. The first Lambeau Leap happened in the 1993 season where Reggie White recovered a fumble against the LA Raiders. He then tossed it to Leroy Butler before he went down and out of bounds. Butler then took it in the end zone for the touchdown, decided to take a jump into the stands, and that created one of the great celebrations in NFL football in the Lambeau Leap, or if you're Cincinnati, you like to call it the Jungle Jump, which is like whatever, So it's the Lambeau Leap, and Leroy Butler started that, a great moment in Packer history. And then Brett Favre arrives, the 7th seed. That was in 1992, where he relieved Don Mikowski, the Magic Man, left that game early after throwing 2 total passes due to injury. The Packers trailed the Bengals by 14 in the 3rd quarter, by 10 points in the 4th quarter. Then Favre had a couple touchdown passes in the final quarter, including the first of many game-winning touchdown passes as he found Kitcher Taylor down the sidelines with 13 seconds left in the game, and no Sterling Sharp on the field as well for the game-winning 35-yard touchdown pass. And Favre's lore and legendary status, it began right there at that moment. Gil, I feel like I should have seeded Brett Favre arrival a little higher, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I remember both of these games vividly, and in fact, I think I was in the same sports bar watching them. But look, the Lambeau Leap has such a cultural significance for Packer fans. It's a magic moment. The Packers won that game against the then LA Raiders 28-0, and that was sort of the icing on the cake. But the Lambeau Leap, there is just such a bond between the players and the fans of Green Bay. that has resulted from the Lambeau Leap. It's one of many traditions that the bicycle riding during training camp that just makes the Packers unique and cements the bond between the players and the fans. That being said, that Brett Favre game, the whole destiny of the franchise changed on that game and that moment. And that was, by the way, the only touchdown of Kittrick Taylor's career with the Packers.
Isn't that crazy?
Crazy. That was his moment. That was his moment. The Packers were 0-2 coming into that game, and Don Majkowski got Wally pipped, basically, because he never came back to start for the Packers again. Brett Favre started every game after that until the end of the 2007 season, which is incredible. I got to go with the Brett Favre arrives game and moment, but I love both of these moments. They are just special.
That's why they're in the tourney. That's why they're in our top 16. It was we don't go to 68 teams like the NCAA tournaments on the men and women's side. This is 16 moments, man. We had to narrow it down quite a bit. And so Brett Favre arriving, the 7th seed, moving on, and he will face the winner of the 15 seed. God calls Reggie to Green Bay versus the 2 seed, Nick Collins, super pick 6. Reggie White obviously had a very publicized free agency tour when NFL free agency first became a thing. And he shocked the world when he announced, he had said, he was like, God's going to tell me where to go. Mike Holmgren famously said, where it's like, hey, I called Reggie, like, hey, this is God. I want you to come to Green Bay.
Left him a message.
The world, signing with the small market Green Bay Packers. And then the Nick Collins super pick 6 against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 45. Howard Green hit Ben Roethlisberger's arm. The Packers were up 7-0. Nick Collins stepped in front of a duck, took it all the way to the house for the touchdown. I'll never forget that celebration. It stunk because that was the last big moment of Nick Collins' career, a career that was shortened way too early. It's just, he had a career-ending neck injury 2 games into the following season, but it helped the Packers. It defined who the Packers were that year, where they were just so good on the back end of that defense. That secondary was legit and so good. And Nick Collins, I feel like it was either that or the Clay Matthews fumble that he forced were the 2 biggest moments in that game. You could have picked out so many moments, but I feel like Nick Collins' super pick 6 was the biggest moment in that game. Between the 15 seed, God calls Reggie to Green Bay, and the 2 seed, Nick Collins, super pick 6. Where are you going, Gil?
I think you seeded the Reggie White thing way too low.
Maybe I did. I think I put this at 10, maybe.
Yeah, at least. Because here's the thing. Do the Packers win the Super Bowl without the Nick Collins interception? Probably not. And you're right. It's in the Super Bowl. It's a defining moment. But what is the future of the Green Bay Packers if Reggie White doesn't sign in Green Bay?
Yeah.
You got to remember culturally where the Packers were in the 80s. Sports Illustrated, I think it was in 1987, I'm guessing, give or take a year, ran an article questioning whether or not the Packers franchise should continue to exist in Green Bay, that there were problems with African-American players not being able to be comfortable there. There were, Forrest Gregg in some of the games that the Bears and Packers were in. The Packers had a reputation of being a dirty team and a losing team, and the franchise was totally going in the wrong direction, lost without vision. And the Packers signed Reggie White, and that reputation changed immediately as soon as that happened. And Reggie came, the fans embraced Reggie. Reggie embraced the city of Green Bay, and the perception of the franchise off the field changed immediately. And on the field, they made the playoffs every year Reggie White was a Packer. So, you win a Super Bowl based on the Nick Collins thing, but what is the future of the Packers franchise if you don't have Reggie White? So, I hate you for making these 2 things go against each other. Not really.
This is why I do this. Yeah.
This one is really, really hard. I would have to go with the Reggie White. I really would. As much as the Nick Collins thing was super special, to me, the whole trajectory of the Packers franchise changed when Reggie White signed with, as you said, the smallest market. People were saying the Packers will die if there's free agency. No one will sign there. Small town, cold weather, not hospitable to African-American players, and they're always losing. And Reggie White changed that just by signing and being Reggie White. I have to go with the Reggie White moment, even though I hate going against Nick Collins because it was a beautiful thing.
I understand. And I went over this seating and I flipped it around probably like 50 times before this, honestly. And I probably should have put this as the 10 seed against Brett Favre's arrival, but luckily for us, next time we're going to go through rounds 2, 3, and 4 in the championship. And the 15 seed God calls Reggie to Green Bay is going to go against number 7 Brett Favre arrives. Because that's going to be a good. And I looked at that. I was like, that would be a good second round match.
It would be.
And I wanted a massive upset in the seedings too. I know it's not really this isn't true bracketology, but this is a massive upset on paper. So there you have it. God calls Reggie to Green Bay, the 15 seed, moving on against the 7 seed Brett Favre arrives. And I do want to say where it's like usually bracketology, they do the first 4 in, last 4 in, first 4 out. The first 4 out in this scenario was Desmond Howard going the distance in Super Bowl 31. Brett Favre to Andre Rison in the second Packers offensive play of the game in Super Bowl 31. The walk-off at Mile High where Brett Favre hit Greg Jennings deep on Monday Night Football. The Hail Mary King reigns on. Aaron Rodgers, Hail Mary in Arizona in the 2015 divisional round. Those just missed the cut. Next time, the greatest Packer moment will be revealed. We're going to go through rounds 2, the semis, and the championship. So make sure you stick with us. I think these are 16 great moments just to look back on. I get chills just thinking about a lot of these too, Gil. And with the tournament here, free agency's kind of slowed down a little bit. We're in that little bit of a lull right now. So we figured March Madness, good time to talk. But Gil, more importantly, what articles do you have coming up on Packers Post and Cheesehead TV?
Oh, boy, so much to talk about. For Cheesehead TV, I'm going to take a look at how the Packers have done in free agency so far. Is Goody doing enough? I mean, I think that's something that a lot of fans are questioning, so I want to address that. And for the Packers Post, I did take a deep dive into Mecole Hardman and what he's doing for this team. And also, can Kenny Clark bounce back? He had such a rough season last year. His cap hit in 2026 is over $30 million. He needs to have a big season this year to keep his job and keep going. And the Packers need him to come back as well. So talked about that.
PackersPost.com, CheeseheadTV.com. Read all of Gil's good stuff there. Gil, you ready to wrap up some trivia?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, the Packers, again, they have a new addition to the wide receiver room, signing former Kansas City Chief and for a short time, former New York Jet Mecole Hardman to a 1-year contract. This upcoming season will be Hardman's 7th in the NFL. Played his college ball for a familiar program in Packerland, the University of Georgia Bulldogs. Packers love their former Georgia Bulldogs. Maybe it's got something to do with that G on the helmet. Gil, which 3 current Green Bay Packers were teammates of Hardman's at Georgia?
Wow. Okay.
3. I will say it's not Javon Bullard because he wasn't.
No. All right. Boy, oh boy. Okay. 3 Packers who were college teammates. So Quay Walker would be 1.
Yep.
Well, so Devontae Wyatt.
Yep.
Is 2.
Third one's tricky.
Yeah, I know who it is too. But I don't think he's a Packer anymore.
No, he is. It's a current Packer, not Eric. Eric Stokes was a teammate of Mecole Hardman's for a time at Georgia, but Eric Stokes is not with the Packers anymore.
Yeah, but that's not who I was thinking of. Are you thinking of John Fitzpatrick?
John Fitzpatrick's not with the Packers
That's
either.
what I mean. Yeah.
No. So you giving up on the third one?
No. Okay, I have one more guess.
He's not going down without a fight, folks.
No, I am not going down without a fight. Jeez.
It's a good trivia question, yeah.
This is a good one.
Wyatt Walker were first-round picks in the same draft in 2022, but the third one's kind of a tricky one.
Brenton Cox.
Look at that. He just needed some extra time. Yeah, Brenton Cox Jr. And you may look at the roster and be like, well, Brenton Cox Jr., he went to the Florida Gators. But no, he was once a 5-star recruit who started his collegiate career at Georgia before he was dismissed from the Georgia program due to an off-field arrest, multiple clashes with the Georgia coaching staff. And as a true freshman in Athens in 2018, when McCole Hardman was in his final year with the Bulldogs, Cox played in 13 games. He registered 20 total tackles and a sack before he was dismissed from the program. And then he sat out the next season. He transferred to the rival Florida Gators, where he played his final 3 years of college football. So, yeah, there you have it. It kind of a trick question for sure there, Gil. But we got there. Because that was a tricky one. I thought I was like, I could throw him a curveball right here. It's a good one. It's a good one.
That was a good question. That was a very good question. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for us today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at all things Packers, or to ask us questions, or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show, and thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.